Hello, everybody, and welcome to None the Lesser. This is your host, Cody Buchanan, and I'm coming at you today with an awesome interview with a unique guest, my very first indie game designer. And I know I haven't been at this that long, so, but it was really cool to sit with this person because I found their games and I found them enthralling. Found them very unique. They're very unique. That's one way to put it. But I reached out and he was down for an interview. So really cool discussion we've got here. He's also spent a lot of time in music. So kind of a double hitter that we've got going on where you get two arts for the price of one. He is a classically trained cellist and at the NYU Tisch School of the Arts, an instructor in game design. So, without any further ado, let's sit and talk with Greg Heffernan, also known as Cosmo D, the mind behind the off-peak city universe and everything that happens within it. All right. Well, hey, I was glad for you to respond and be willing for an interview. That was exciting for me to see.
Right on.
It's awesome to have you on here. If we want to start with you introducing yourself and telling everyone what it is you do in your own words, we can start there.
Yeah, my name's Greg. Some might know me as Cosmo D. I've had that name since I was, I think, 11 or 12 years old. Just the Cosmo part, it was kind of a joke, and it stayed with me as like a youthful nickname, but then followed me into my professional practice as first a musician and now a designer of games. And I've made 3 games since 2013, 2014. I had 4 if you count kind of an early prototype that you can play on an itch.io called Saturn V. But yeah, 4 games. So Off-Peak, Saturn V first, Off-Peak, The Norwood Suite, and then Tales from Off-Peak City, Volume 1, which is kind of like it's a game in and of it. It implies there are more volumes, but it's actually a standalone game, which will exist of a piece of more standalone games to come. So an anthology type game. So yeah, and doing it since 2013, kind of fell into it or wandered into it. Always was a gamer, but was primarily trained as a musician. And by trained, I basically mean I was like going to cello lessons when I was young and studied music and studied composition and played in jazz groups. And yeah, I was just really deep into the music scene for years. And then kind of made and then I got into commercial composition. So I started to get into like that whole world, both as a session musician and as a composer. And then, yeah, at some point I just made like once I discovered I could sort of get into making digital narrative style interactive creative work, aka these games that you now see, I just went full 2 feet in. I just made a hard break. So I still write music for my own games, and I still kind of weave that into my narrative ideas. And I have a lot of experiences from my musical past that have informed my game design present. But now I have experiences from my present that inform my present too. So I guess that's the long and the short of it. I've lived in New York for most of my adult life, New York City, and I have moved through a lot of different scenes, a lot of different musical scenes, and now gaming and designer scenes. So I consider myself pretty traveled in different worlds. I love it. That's why I think my games, I try to reflect the different ideas and people and personalities that I've met in my journeys. So and they all have different experiences and different points of view. So I also try to weave that into my games. So I think that's me. I could move in a number of directions with this, but I'll kick it to you. I guess how did you find my work? Like how did it come on your radar?
So I think I saw it was actually in I think his name's Jacob Geller.
The video the video that he
Yeah,
posted.
he did a episode called like Bad Graphics.
Yes, the bad. Yeah, not very. So a recent you recently come to the work through the bad graphics video. I think that only came out like early 2020.
Yeah, it was this year.
Yeah.
Yeah, I started watching a lot of his videos, and then that one came out, and I was like, yeah, I want to check this out. And it's a really cool video. I love the way he breaks down a lot of things and like compares it to architecture and music. And
Yeah, he does. He's a strong essayist. It seems like he speaks. A lot of people are resonating with what he says about the discourse. So
yeah, absolutely. But then he mentioned your work in Tales from Off Peak City Volume 1, and I was like, okay, this looks like a project right up my alley, because I was getting so like the way he talks about all those AAA titles in that video. I'm like, yeah, these are all beautiful looking, but like the substance is like the same from game to game.
mm-hmm.
I'll still play them, I'll still enjoy them for what they are, but I need something different. And then, knowing his videos, he offers that. So that's where I discovered the whole Cosmo D saga of games as they stand. So
Right on. Yeah, I
yeah.
mean he it's interesting having him highlight all of these things. To me, to where I'm standing, I see his essay and I watch his video essay, and I'm like, yeah, definitely agree, definitely feeling it. I feel like I'm leading. I guess I'm kind of acting on his video essay. Like what he wants is something that I'm already trying to put into active practice with my work. But I also feel like it's nice to know that there's a circle of people. I mean, that video's gotten a lot of hits. That a wide circle that feel like they agree and they get the content, and they want the same quality of experience that maybe they're not getting from more mainstream fare. And it's just good to know that it's out there. I mean, even as a consumer, as a player, I try to seek those experiences from games. And it's heartening to know that it's out there, and that I'm trying to do what I can to add to that discourse too, from my corner.
Yeah, absolutely. There's definitely a crowd for that. Would you say a struggle has been like actually getting to that crowd? I mean, you seem to have gotten a pretty good pick up from that video, maybe some other videos. I've seen some reviews and interviews, but it's got to be a lot harder than the AAA titles.
I think it's always going to come down to who, if we're going to be straight up, it comes down to who has the most money to pay for marketing. And when I say marketing, I mean like even some of the higher tier indie game conglomerate have resources at their disposal to really put forward projects that could be similarly situated. While I don't have those resources, I'm not hurting for them. I mean, I think that I'm operating on a certain level where my fan base and my sort of business grows on a slow, steady incline, kind of like the Bandcamp business model. It's been slow, steady for many years, always up, always pointed up, and always moving, but never chasing some sudden meteoric incline. I've had a couple of bumps, and I've definitely caught a couple of breaks, which I'm very grateful for. But in the day-to-day, it's just, like I said, slow, steady. At a certain point, as I continue to release more work, that turns into like a lot of the independent game companies I admire, Devolver, the people at No More Robots, Finji. They've been doing it a long time, and they've really built like a real, at least from where I'm standing, they've had some really strong successes over the years that have been able to afford them to move with more muscle in the industry. AAA, even more. I mean, that's just how it is. That being said, Steam has been great. Word of mouth's been great. People like Jacob Geller, lifting up the work. Certain influencers who have latched onto the work have given it some signal boost. Obviously, the press, the fans. So yeah, I mean, it kind of sits in this place in the ecosystem of games that I feel like it feels right. It feels right for right now. I think I believe that like the cream rises, and that as I continue to evolve the work and iterate on it and add more things, it's going to gain even more traction. So I'm just sort of putting a certain amount of stock in the slow, steady build for me. With the lack of a larger what's the word? Larger capital, in lieu of larger injection of capital cash to pay for the big PR bucks. I'll take it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Now, I mean, from a ground level, I have a fairly okay understanding of what your games are standing on, but for everyone else, from a ground level, what goes into your games, what software do you build your worlds in, and kind of like what secondary programs go into that as well?
There's a couple of different programs, but I've sort of put at a certain point, I taught myself Unity, and I never stopped learning it, or I kind of have gotten deeper and deeper with it over the years. I've also gotten deeper and deeper with Blender. And it just as I think I bet on the right horse with them, because they've gotten more intuitive as a software. And then I've been using Ableton Live for years and years and years to make music. And then I have a couple of like situational kind of Swiss Army knife software that I use just to do very specific things. But I'd say those are the big three. Mm-hmm. And when I mean, and Visual Studio Code when I want to program. But I mean, pick your coding software. That's mainly just that's a personal preference. I could swap that with any coding software and I'd probably get the same result. But in terms of essential software, Unity, Blender, Ableton Live.
Okay. I'm a little more familiar with Unreal. I've been kind of dabbling in that a little, and their nodes.
I really like it. I've been dabbling too. It's almost like what could have been, what might this be if I was like an Unreal guy? But yeah, what are you thinking? What are your thoughts on it?
I don't know. I mean, I feel like the stuff I've seen come out of Unreal, it's really polished, almost like it just comes out with a sheen, and that's fine. But I do think like with your games, it would almost feel like I don't know, it wouldn't fit like to me, because like I feel like there's a softness to your visuals, and I don't know if I'm sure you can get that in Unreal, but it's not meant for that.
I don't know. The truth of it is, I kind of just do my best, quote unquote, and there's no real like I can't. I don't. There's not a lot of there's intentionality that I have when I make the work. But then I think what a lot of people get out of it is not always what I intend. Or at least I look back at like the Norwood Suite now and I think, I would have, I would have changed certain aesthetic choices there. But for players, those choices like make the experience for them, and they make sense in that moment. Like, I'm always looking back at my past work, and I'm always thinking, how could I polish this more? How could I make this more subtle or change this? But I think that's the struggle of the creators. Like, you got to just at some point walk away from the painting and put the brush down and say, yeah, I'm done. I'm not gonna keep messing with this anymore. It's as good as I can get it right now.
Right.
But it's interesting, because one thing that surprised me about when I first got into making games is that people they sensed an aesthetic that I don't know I was entirely conscious of when I was making it. I just was making what I wanted to make. To this day, I don't really know what that aesthetic is, except that it's like very honest and it's very considered, but it's not it's not contrived at all. It's just, it is what it is. It just is this. But yeah, I just make it, and things emerge, and I get ideas in the moment, and I start riffing, and it's fun, and it's honest, like I said, and it feels natural, and some people think it's ugly, and some people think it's quite aesthetically pleasing. And I'm like, wow, that's really interesting that people would have such visceral reactions one way or another. Or they think it looks bizarre, or they think it feels weird. Like, all of the things that when I make them, they don't feel weird to me. They feel very. And when you're working on games, it's taken a long time, so you get a lot of chance to sit with this stuff. So I can kind of sense what's working for me and what isn't. And I will, a month, 2 months, 3 months goes by, and I'll be playing through the same level. I need to make sure that level I still like it. However many more months in, I'm testing it again and again and again. I need to know that it's still working for me. And if it's not, I usually cut it. But yeah, I think part of the reason why people are react to the aesthetic is because I've let it like sink in. It's like I've spent a lot of time with it, and it feels good to me. So it gives that. If anything, that's the one thing that helps me kind of commit to my style.
Yeah. I think. I mean, like, even I have to admit, I haven't played Saturn V. I wanted to get into that, but is that on Steam?
No, it's on itch.io.
Okay, yeah. So I wasn't able to get into that one, but I played Off Peak up to, through Norwood Suite and up to Off Peak Volume 1 Tales, and it seems to get like more and more as you go. Obviously, it's as a player through all of it, I can tell that more is being learned about the program you're working in, and you're applying more technique, but it's still maintaining, like you said, that aesthetic that people are, whatever it is that they're pulling out of it. For me, it's like this, I guess, bizarre, almost like, I tried to explain it to a friend, and like, there's nothing inside any of these games that's actually like scary, but for some reason, despite like enjoying myself through it, like walking the halls and streets and finding all these secret passageways, I also feel like I have to like proceed with caution. Like, there's like some level of discomfort despite like enjoying all this music and these wacky kind of characters that you come across, but like, there is a level of discomfort for some reason.
I think there's a tone that I want to hit on, and it's a tone that feels like the tone that I'm interested in is this, like, it's inviting. Like, I like, part of why I got into making games is because I wanted to experience what it's like have that power to score the games and not have to be told this is how it needs to sound. I'd been taking a lot of direction from ad agencies. This is what this ad needs. This is what it needs to sound like, and we need to hit this with these emotions, and all of that needs to sell product. And I was basically this was like my reaction to that. This was like me saying, well, actually, let's have a digital space that's moodily lit, but the music isn't like meant to be happy or sad or make you feel anything somewhat conventionally, what you would expect in a game. uh, it's more open to interpretation, and part of what makes it open to interpretation is the fact that the mood is maybe a little mysterious. It's a little moodily lit. Um, it's a little unsettling, as creaky old buildings are by nature, or
Mhm.
or like abandoned or derelict neighborhoods are by nature, um, or tunnels, or by like what's around at the end of this tunnel. Um, and so that's like inherently unsettling, but then the music is very grooving and peaceful, or like thoughtful, or whatever, cerebral or emotional. So that brings it a different. So you're seeing these images, and you're getting this sense, like this sort of visceral primal sense of caution, and that contrasts with the music. And then you set that in the context of the story, or whether you consider it dream logic, or whether you really take it at face value. And I think all of those things are sort of meant to combine into this very distinctive stew that is really meant to feel a very certain way. And it's not something for everybody, but I think for certain people, it's I try it feels like something that you don't see a lot of in the space. That just
Right.
is that. So yeah, I think it's okay. I think a lot of that's actually quite intentional. Um,
Keeping players on their toes.
Keeping players is thinking what's around the next corner, because in a sense that's also good design, because you want to get players, I want to give players a sense that there's always something interesting around the next corner. If they just go, if they keep moving in a direction, whatever that direction, they're going to find something, and that something is going to inform and maybe enrich their experience. Yeah.
There's really not anything I can complain about in these games. I really enjoy the atmosphere, because it's like set in this city that there's some sort of like conflict between these individuals and these corporations that they're talking about, and there's like, I guess, like speaking on more on like the discomfort level that comes more from like a lack of trust in indie game designers, and not in a bad way. Just some of them like to throw in that jump scare, and I'm like, is that going to happen? And it doesn't happen, but there are some parts where I'm like, oh, okay, what the fuck just happened?
Yeah, it's also like this sense of, like in music, you just have those freak out moments that just feel really, like, I don't do it all the time, but I try to do it in moments where you're just like, yeah, okay, that was a moment, or that was like that was an exclamation point. um I think in Norwood it kind of ends on an exclamation point. I actually,
Absolutely.
the Norwood ending was actually really, it went through a few revisions, because there's a version of it where you get into Bogart's room, and he's sitting there, but next to him are the two people from the outside. I was trying to do like the bookending ending, like the sort of the narrative approach, where you see them in the beginning and then you see them at the end, like the parallel,
Like full circle.
the full circle. And either one, they're flanking him, and he's got his arm around them, and they're flanking him, and they're kind of geeking out. Oh, it's DJ Bogart, I love your stuff, we wanted to get in your party. And it's like they're up in his his like green room sort of thing, like hanging out with the fans, and he's hanging out with his fans, his groupies, basically. But then the old man comes in, and he's pacing towards you, and they just kind of like faint. They look at the old man. Oh, and then Bogart's head explodes, and then they look at the head, and then they just like keel over. Just like, and I had all that in there, and I guess Alliance, the publisher, like they play tested it, and they were, I think it was just a lot at once. I think it was a lot, and it was really intense, and it was like a lot to take in, and it was like overload. And so I dialed it back, and I actually had it so that it was just you and Bogart, which I think was actually to me, that felt like the showdown. It's like mano a mano or whatever. And it just made you, Bogart, and then ultimately the old man. And I think it just made that interaction feel more lonely and more like you're still kind of solitary. Like it's all of a sudden it's this party again, and there's this, and it's crazy again. So those are the kind of creative changes that I've made, and that I made in this. I didn't really make that many. Actually, one creative change I made in Offbeat City was like adding this whole new delivery. I added like a delivery system to the game. I added like another delivery where you deliver to this cameraman, and like that. I don't know if you played the version of the game that has that, but I basically expanded the game by like a little bit more, and that was just, it kind of shifted around a few things, but it wasn't, well, I didn't cut anything. I didn't change anything past
that. You had to patch that in, right?
I did. I patched it in.
Yeah, I think I did play that one because that's kind of a creepy delivery.
Yeah. Okay. So then it was it added this other creepy, like the other deliveries weren't quite as creepy, but that was like the creepy delivery. And it also, I liked how it kind of rounded out some of the narrative balancing that I was dealing with after I released the game. Or there were things that I wanted to like narratively sort of shift and tweak, and that was my response to that. It was like a director's cut.
Yeah, I thought that was I didn't know that was an addition. I thought that was just part of it, but that was really cool, that extra delivery. There's a point though where you get in the game in Tales from Offbeat City. I finished it, but there was still like deliveries, but it just said pending like a
health inspection.
Are those like you can't access those, or
they imply more than there are? Okay. They're not accessible. I sort of imply that in future volumes you'll be able to deliver to those people or whatever. But yeah, no. It just kind of implies that life goes on and more people need pizza, but you've been giving people some questionable pizza, so that's gonna be addressed for future.
That's cool, because I was like I had like the last delivery, and I was like, I don't know how that, like, when this ends. And then obviously the plot is surrounding Caetano's saxophone, and I'm like, when I go down there, does the game end? I was trying to figure this all out, and I just couldn't get those unlocked. I was like, how do I get this health inspection? I want to deliver more of these wacky pizzas. And I love the toppings, like brain matter and flamingo meat. Some interesting choices in there. Is that like New York style pizza?
No, it's not, but it is. It was sort of, so when I was first coming up with the idea, one of my buddies here in New York was like, yeah, you could do it, you could play it really straight, or you could just take it really out. And that was kind of my way of saying, I'm going to start with what you'd expect, and then I'm going to just push it further out. Because why not? Let's see what people want to put on their pizza. And then I kind of came up with the idea that you could kind of weave it into the fiction. Like it all of a sudden, the fiction of the world and the story and the pizza toppings, the gray matter, the fact that Caetano feeds these pizzas to his kind of automata family, it all kind of it interconnects, and then all the people eating the pizzas kind of have these weird freakouts, and what's in the pizza, how do you feel when you eat it, like the brain, like how does it feel to eat. The truth is, pizza's a deep, where I live now, even in Brooklyn, there's so many pizza places around. It's hilarious how much people are deep in with pizza here, and to the very high end, or like very artistic or artisanal, to the very much like the people's pizza, like whatever slice on the corner and everything in between. And I think it's great. I wish I could eat more pizza. I feel like it's something I have as a treat these days, and I've made pizza, which I think is really fun challenge, because it's actually kind of hard to make it at home because your oven only gets so hot.
Oh yeah.
And the crust, it's like it's a tricky thing to make, really. It's like baking bread and making like this primordial soup ingredient, sauce, cheese balance thing while you're also baking a flatbread. It's tricky at home.
Yeah.
So I like it as a hobby. I like it as a known culinary thing. It's like a love letter to that. And then, but what if in this world it was all that and more? And you couldn't order slices. You had to order the whole thing. And orders were, just like open to interpretation. You know what that actually reminds me of? In Japanese food, you have the omakase, which is like, you just say to the chef, I want what you take me on the journey, chef. And that's kind of what I have players do. It's like, I trust you, just make me the pizza, whatever it is. I trust you, oh chef, which is the player.
Oh, that's interesting. I've never heard of that. Omakase?
Yeah, I don't know quite how it's pronounced, but I know it's called Omakas. Omakase. Yeah, omakase. Which is I'll leave it up to you, the phrase means.
Yeah.
Trust.
Is that,
and it's very expensive. It's very,
okay. So
when you order the omakase, just at like more lower end Japanese restaurants where it's like a multi-course meal, and I don't know, maybe it's like $25, and the chef just gives you like a specific or like succession of sushi that they've prepared, and then they top it off with something. So
yeah. Do you have to tell them like some sort of like poetic line like you would in your game?
I wish it was all. I wish it was omakase, and then you read them a poem, and then they give you sushi that they think is based on that poem. I bet some chef probably has done that, but no, this is. I wish.
I would try that once. Like, you go into the restaurant and you say like, yeah, I had a bad day, girlfriend broke up with me, and then like a few other things, and then see what he whips up.
Well, that's kind of like what the bar. I mean, it's like a good bartender. You go into a bar, maybe you know the person, or maybe you don't, but they can read your mood, and there's a mutual trust, and they say, "Hey, let me pour you something," and they just know, and then you're there, and you have it, and it's just the right thing. And I mean, I'm not as deep into bar culture. But there's a show on Netflix that I've totally been obsessed with, and it actually served as a partial inspiration for this game. It's called Midnight Diner: Tokyo Stories. And
I've seen it. I haven't watched it.
Right. So it's the whole conceit. It's been around for about 10 years. This guy runs a diner. He's an older guy, and all these people, some are regulars, some are like the person of the week, come to the diner, and they bring their own ingredients. They're like, they say, hey, I brought this like daikon radish and squid, what can you make? And then everything he makes is like really, I guess, like the Japanese equivalent of like macaroni and cheese, like comfort food. and it's always amazing. It's always like they're like, "Oh, it's so good, master!" Like they call him master. He's called the master, um, and I think they say it in English, like they say master in English, but everything else is in Japanese. But he and then the show goes into their lives, like whatever their problem is that they're having outside the diner, and then they either bring it into the diner and they confess to the master that they've had these problems, and then the master cooks them the meal and gives some sort of life advice or some sort of advice, and then it solves their issue, and then everything's nice. It's almost corny, but it seems to get away with it, and it's very sincere. It's very heartwarming. So that was kind of my thought. That was an inspiration for this.
And that's diner based in Japan.
It's a diner. It's not a real place. It's a fiction. I mean, it's fiction, but yeah, it's like one of those. They call it an izakaya. It's a diner. Okay. It's like one of those tiny. It's like a 12-seater, and it's in the shape of a U, and everybody sits around, and the chef stands in the center, and yeah, it's a scene.
Okay, I gotta check this out then.
It's open from midnight to 7 a.m. That's the conceit. Like, this is a special diner, and all the people who come in are like night owls. It's like Nighthawks at the diner. It's very Tom Waits. It's like all these weirdos and yakuza, and yeah. So that's kind of like my. I love that stuff. And I mean, I will say also Tom Waits is a big touchstone for me, because his music and his lyrics are all about like weirdos, and it's vibey, but it's also really soulful. So yeah. And his instrumentation is really cool, and it's almost theatrical, and yeah. So
yeah, Tom Waits is on his own level, that's for sure.
Yeah, he's on his own level, and that's like what I'm inspired by. So when people, you know, it's like right now I feel like I'm competing with the AAA space, but also with the indie game space with my work. But in a sense, I take comfort in the fact that I am really trying to carve my own space, you know, regardless of all the stuff that's happening around. So that's my goal, is to continue that and be able to. And those are my touchstones.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Now the music in your games, though, obviously you have music out of your games as well. And actually I want to make sure I was looking around wherever I could, but on Spotify, there's, an album called Material Culture. Is that you?
Ooh, is that me? Material Culture?
It's Greg Heffernan.
Yeah.
And, Jeremy Crinsley.
Oh yeah! Wow. Oh yeah.
Do you remember doing that one?
Yeah, I do actually. I didn't realize it was on Spotify.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so rad! Wow, he put that on there. That's hilarious.
Yeah, it's really, really great. I love that as a project.
Yeah, he's an old buddy of mine from like my youth, and we reconnected because he lives in New York as well. He lived in New York at the time that we were doing this, and yeah, that was 2015. We were playing music at a mutual friend's wedding, and we just did that, and we put it together, and there it is. Yeah, I was like deep in, you know, doing some cello deep diving, and that was like, yeah, one of those things that I did with a buddy of mine, kind of a one-off. But I'm glad it's out there.
Yeah, it's cool. It's 5 parts, and it's got like September 19th, 2015 in the title. Is that the day of that wedding?
I guess it was either the day of the wedding or it was the day we recorded it. Okay. I think it was one or the other.
Part 1 has 450,000 hits on it, so.
Oh my God, really?
Yeah.
What's it called? Like, what's the
It's called Material Culture 9/19/15.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, Greg Heffernan. I guess because it's the first one. That was God Mode. Okay, so the fact that God Mode put it out is probably why it got so many hits. God Mode put out Gage's first record. I think they put out Shamir. I mean, God Mode I think it still is, but it's a label of Force, and that's really cool that that got put out. I've been like, it's one of those things where like you do a lot of projects and you contribute to a lot of stuff, but you never really know where it's going to crop up and how it's going to crop up and under what circumstances. I pretty much just did that as a one. I was already doing other things at the time. Off Peak had just been released, but the Norwood Suite, like I think I was in very early production of the Norwood Suite at that time, so I was kind of in between stuff, and that was one of those things that kind of emerged from that time. Just something I was getting into, and Archie was ending. Archipelago was sort of winding down, so it was like that was winding down. This was a thing that was happening. Yeah, cool.
Yeah, I was excited to find, because every time I set something up with someone, I make sure to dig out as much as I can, and that was a cool one to find because it's a lot. I could tell listening to it that it was you. I wasn't positive, but I could tell just based on like the instrumental use and the fact that there was still like a lot of elements of like electronic, like synth, and like it just was like a lot more spacious than the work that I'd heard previously. And by that I mean just like a vast atmosphere is the way it sounded. And Archie though, that ended, that was just kind of like just fizzled out, like it hit where it needed and you guys were done.
It was actually I think the truth of that for me was I just couldn't commit to being in that group. Was so all encompassing during that stretch. I think we were together for like 2011 to 2015, and we were trying to get the group off the ground. We had some interest from various booking agencies, and we'd done a few tours, we'd played a few festivals. It was going to require a lot more work to get us where we needed to be, and I kind of took stock in what I was getting into in terms of like game development and like what that band really needed. And I personally just said, I think this is about where I need to get off. This is the station where I leave. I need to take my creative energies in a new direction. And I don't think my bandmates were, to their credit, they were very, supportive and gracious about it. But I think that was definitely a decision that I personally made because I needed to I'd seen the success of Off Peak and I sort of saw this new road opening to me. And unfortunately, it didn't involve being in a steady band that was really, that band was really hustling. We were doing radio shows every week. We were playing around. We were gigging. We were fielding meetings. It was like a real hustle. And it was also a hustle that didn't, it wasn't as much a return on the investment as other things that I was doing at the time. And the game space was just so, it felt like such a new, fresh, open door. I think I did, like I said, walk through it with 2 feet. So that's why that ended.
Yeah. Ultimately you're just working on what sticks to the wall, right?
Yeah. And what feels right, what feels honest, what feels like emotionally, what feels just emotionally where I want to be. And what I wanted to do at that point was make the Norwood Suite. That was the idea I had in my head, and going to like play electronic music shows with a certain degree of exposure but also energy that I needed to invest in that. I just couldn't do it at that point in that way.
Mm-hmm.
So I basically was just like, sorry, I can't. I gotta move on. I gotta move out elsewhere. But it was a hard decision, and it's always hard to say no to things. It's always hard to walk away from things. But in walking away from something, I walked towards this new thing, and that's why I really wanted to make sure Norwood was what came through. I sort of was. I had put I knew that if I was going to do this, if this was what if I was going to walk away from like a successful art musical artistic venture, then whatever I did afterwards needed to be really strong, or needed to be, I needed to do it justice. I wasn't putting undue pressure on myself, but it was like, well, if I'm gonna take this, I want to take this the whole way. So hence the Norwood Suite, and then Offbeat City, and then whatever comes next. This is ultimately, it was like a career change, or it was a career evolution, or a career mutation. And Archie, unfortunately, was like a flashpoint in me having to just switch gears.
Yeah, and I mean, obviously, you're still doing the music because it goes with the games. With Off-Peak, it almost felt like maybe the music was meant to cater to the game, or the game was meant to cater to the music. I'm not sure, but with like Norwood Suite and Tales from Off-Peak City, it felt more like a marriage of the two, where they met in the middle. Like, I can listen to these albums for these games separate, no problem. I enjoy the music greatly, but together it is truly like a piece, like an art piece. I guess, what lessons did you have to overcome to kind of like go into that transformation, if you agree with that?
I think that the games and the music, so with those games, especially Off-Peak City, I started with the music. I started with the opening bass line. That was like the foundation for the whole game, and that guided every decision I made with that game. It always went back to that like initial bass line you hear at the beginning of the game. But yeah, I did the sketches first. Then I basically built out the game, enhanced the sketches, added more. Then and added more music and situational. Then I revisit everything I made at the end, towards the end of the process, take 2-3 weeks and just edit those sketches, now that I've had some time with them, into the songs that you then hear on the soundtrack. So there's this period of early ideation, then the game happens and I weave that in, and then I sort of look back and I take in everything that had happened up to that point and present a final polished piece of standalone audio that I get mastered by a guy in Berlin or whatnot. But along the way, yeah, the music and the game are kind of existing together. Everything is interrelated. In fact, for the delivery where you go to the photographer, the music went through a considerable degree of evolution. It started kind of low energy and kind of meandering, but then it iterated went through several passes. Not all my music does that. Some of it just is there, and it's there for the time. But sometimes in cases like that, I had to revise it. So
Yeah,
or I wanted to revise it. I want to make it faster. I want to have 2 sections, whatever. But yeah, it does feel like I want to make music for this world. Music I always made exists in the world, in my head. Like before I was making games, the music I was making was like soundtracking this space, and then I made the space. So that's once I could, like, there's an appreciation for being able to do it that I think comes out. And so I really want to make sure that players can feel that, feel that I'm appreciative of the fact that this exists at all.
And then there's obviously the story within these games, and they all have their own. The story of Caetano interests me in that there's this history behind him that, you know, you kind of unravel as you go through. But the one thing that stands out to me is that this object that you're pursuing, the saxophone, which is introduced at the beginning of the game, is like on display, but only to him, almost like he's, my interpretation, like he's punishing himself. Like he won't touch it again, it sounds like, but it's like right there as like a reminder.
Wow. That may be. I mean, I think a lot of that feels like a reflection. I reflect on my own sort of. I talked earlier about how I was playing music so much, and now I'm working in games almost to a similarly intense degree. I don't have the bandwidth to pick up my cello like I used to, or even like open Ableton and just go deep on tracks like I used to. And I think there must be some level of me expressing a wistfulness around how my relationship to making music has changed over the years. And so I think there's an element of that. There's also an element of being at peace with that, and making peace with that. Caetano's happy to make his pizzas. He's happy to have the saxophone be in its place. He's happy to know that there was a moment of time when he could play the saxophone more actively. But I think it's even that and Norwood Suite, like those games are me sort of expressing that, hey, you can do many things. You don't have to be this one person or this one type of person. You're not just a musician. You're not just a game designer. You're not just a lawyer or whatever. Pick your career path. Like you can be what you want to be when you want to be it. And it's okay to like not be what you used to or how you identified, and it's okay to make peace with that. So that's kind of the message I want to get across, however directly or indirectly. But like, we don't always have to be what people think we should or ought to or expect of us, or expect of ourselves. It's okay to switch it up and to try stuff, even if it risks feeling uncomfortable or getting ridiculed or getting puzzlement or pushback. If you're being your authentic self in the moment, I think that's really quite liberating, regardless of what anyone else says. So that's something I try to bring forth in my games. It's like, be you, come as you are, no judgment. There's a place for you here. We acknowledge your past. We acknowledge your present. We hope the best for your future. So here's some tunes. Here's some pizza. Let's hang out. Like that's kind of my attitude. That's my attitude.
Yeah. So in a way, the pizza shop to Caetano is Off Peak City to Cosmo D. Then
it's a place. It's a state of mind where you just kind of are, and it's people can explore and vibe out and relax, but also feel a little bit of tension and acknowledge that stuff is going on. Like there's all this crazy stuff going on in Off Peak City, kind of behind closed doors or like behind the scenes or in the background of the fiction of the world. But like, yeah, it's an illusion of real life in a way.
Yeah. There's obviously a whole lot to pick apart in the games.
There's like so the people in the lobby wearing the masks, like be careful, like gotta wear masks. I'm like, oh my god, how did that actually become like a reality in life, like with the masks?
Yeah,
and, like.
Yeah, I was gonna mention that. I was like, how did you predict that?
And like the fact that it's the city street, like during the lockdown in New York, streets were empty. It was a ghost town. It was creepy as all get out. And then I'm like, wow, it reminds me exactly of what my game looks like right now. Things have definitely picked up since then, but I couldn't believe it. Like I was like, oh my god. I was just getting the game ready to be released in mid-May on Steam, and I was like, "Oh my god, what is going on?" I like this.
Yeah,
this became real.
Yeah, there's been a few things that I'm like, how are these people predicting this? Your symbolism with the masks, like even in Norwood, there was some characters wearing a mask.
Yep.
At least the one that I remember who makes a second appearance, who freaked me out.
Yeah.
um, and then some lyrics that came out in like 2019 of like people wearing masks from other artists. It's just like, what? Was everyone else in on this and I wasn't?
It was in the air. I mean, it's like one of those things, like everybody's afraid of something like this happening, and oh God, here it actually is.
Yeah. How has the this pandemic affected you?
I think at first I kind of carried on. I had a mission basically to finish the game and get it released, and then I added more content into the summer. And then I switched gears, and I'm starting work on I've been working on my next game, volume 2. But really, what I'm doing right now is like a prototype, which uses RPG mechanics. It's like a top down. Like I played Disco Elysium over last winter break, and it really inspired me. And I was like, well, how could I do like my twist on like what Disco Elysium did with like dice checks and not necessarily dialogue, but like I do a lot of tabletop role playing stuff. So kind of an abstracted role playing layer to kind of maybe fold that in to my next Offbeat City volume. So yeah, getting into that as my next game, and then I'm starting to teach remotely at NYU as a game development class. I teach a game development class at NYU. But to be honest, it's been good for me because of the nature of my work is kind of, it's at home, or it's sort of solitary, or it's remote. But to be honest, I think I've finally allowed myself to feel these feelings, the feelings of like, wow, this is a thing that's happening, and it's happened. And, it's been a long, I am actively missing people that I was able to communicate with on Zoom more regularly early on, because we were all just like, well, it's going to be like we hang out, but we're on Zoom. Like all of that initial energy is kind of dissipated. And now it's like, okay, we got to actually really try to see each other. And in lieu of that, several of my friends moved out of New York. They couldn't live here anymore for various reasons due to the pandemic. It's like a slow, lingering, I guess what's the word? It's a certain kind of melancholy that that comes with like being away from people for long amounts of time that I would normally see. I was going to go to Berlin to a Maze festival. Couldn't do it. I was going to visit an old friend in North Carolina. Couldn't do it. I was going to visit my cousins in Los Angeles. Couldn't do it. And like those are like anchors that like root you to people in your life. I'm sure you know people long distance that you can't see, that you're just like, man, like that like made my year feel like a year. Like, and those, once you take those moments away and everything kind of just flows together, I who have a lot of patience in general, I'm finally feeling it. I'm lucky. I've gotten to, I have a good tight social unit. I'm not like a loner by any sense. Everything is basically cool. But yeah, I don't know. It's been a long time with this, and thankfully, restaurants are opening up, and things are sort of moving in a direction. But I think it's been really intense being around in college life, like seeing how the students are dealing with stuff and hearing their stories, and not being able to teach them in person, and not being able to see people that I normally would. Like I know people who have kids who are like just at their wits' end, and it's just very difficult for a lot of people in my circle, in various ways. And after a while, you're just like, damn, wow, this really like psychologically took a toll, whether it was like an immediate toll or it was like a slow burn. And I think I'm feeling the slow burn.
Like I live with my wife and daughter, so that's
Yeah.
a very easy unit to lean on. But yeah, at this point, it's like I really would like to see my friends by now.
Yeah.
So yeah, I get it. Yeah.
Seriously.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's kind of, but I think the upside of that is that, you know, I will internalize that. That will go into my work. That will inform whatever I make next. And I'll try to approach it with honesty and perspective and sensitivity. And I don't know, you know, we try to reflect the times that we live in. And I definitely want to do that. As I think right now I'm still sort of in the technical sort of weeds with this new prototype, but once I'm at the point where I'm like more in expression mode, I'm going to really, you know, who knows? I don't know. I'm just gonna go in. I'm gonna go deep.
That's awesome.
I'll be honest about whatever.
Is there a timeline for that project that you're working on, or?
I would love to. So I'm gonna make sure, because I'm doing an RPG, I've never really done a game with this degree of like mechanical. It's not like a very intricate RPG. It has stat checks and it has modifiers and stuff, but I still want to make sure that it's fun and that it's solid. And I'm probably gonna find out that if it is, because I love RPGs. So by this maybe next month, I'm going to start having it play tested in like a few key interactions that kind of show the systems off. Then I'm going to build it out a little more through the winter break and then into the spring. And then I think I'll have something to show in the spring. And that's like sort of the full iteration of this idea. And I'm not sure if I'm going to pitch it to a publisher yet, or if I'm going to just sort of put it out there, if I'm going to tease it, if I'm going to release it as like a playable teaser, kind of like the PT model, or if I'm just going to work on it. Well, it won't be, it's not going to be scary. It's actually going to be like, I know. But it's like that kind of a scope. It's like a short, intense, whatever. So, yeah, I don't know. In the spring, I'll kind of know where the road is going to take me. But until then, I'm just making the next thing. You know, Offbeat City, I kind of stepped away. I got one more patch to do that I just had on the agenda, but like that's done. That's in the can. So I've given myself like maybe a month and a half to just catch up on anime and watch stuff, watch Midnight Diner, and then you know, ease in. And I'm helping. One thing I'm doing at NYU is I'm helping the community there create a multiplayer space for that community. Like we're going to build a multiplayer space together, like learn the tech for making multiplayer games in Unity. And there's some really great students who I'm working with who are super talented, very inspired by what the Amaze space did. I don't know if you follow Amaze in Berlin, the games festival, but they went digital. They created like a digital festival, a digital representation of their festival, and anybody could log in. So that was super inspiring for me. And then so working on that project with the NYU community, game design community, and I guess that's it. And yeah, working on this RPG. I think you'll like it. I think you're gonna. I think it's. I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but I I'm feeling all right about it. I like that it's like kind of not in my wheelhouse. Like it's, the first person approach has, like, I feel like I've got that where I want it, and now I want to kind of find a new horizon of challenge. Um, so
Is it I guess as a story and the music and the environment, is it cohesive with the previous projects?
it's set in the same place. It's set in the same world. Everything is like interconnected. It's a lot of the same. Part of the reason I do that actually is practical. It's like I can reuse assets more easily if I just keep setting the games in the same world. It's kind of like an acting troupe, and it's the same characters, but they just put on different costumes, but it's the same theater and the same characters. So that's how I see that. I mean, I also love world building. I love deepening a world over time. I think that's really interesting as well. But it's also practical. So yes, it'll be set in Off Peak City. You'll see a lot of the same characters, but in new contexts, put in different situations.
That's exciting, because I need to know more about like these like conspiracies that are going on and all these backstories and
Yeah,
like
that's not going anywhere. All of that
okay, good.
all that's in play. I don't want you to think I'm going on a tangent. I think in terms of this is more of a design excursion. This is like a design prototype to see if it works, to see if it has legs, and then I'm going to fold that into what I'm already doing if it is as successful as I envision it could be. So that's my rough game plan for this moment in time. And I feel like
Okay.
I've given myself the space to do that because I did, after releasing Off Peak City, I feel like I've given myself some leeway to stretch out.
Okay. Are we going to learn more about this human resource horizons or what?
Oh yeah, like
Okay, good.
that is I cannot wait to bring that in. I mean, I dare I say that some of this RPG prototype human resource horizons might play an instrumental role in that in this prototype. They are a big piece of the puzzle.
Great. Yeah. I don't want you to spoil nothing, but there's a lot around the streets of Off Peak City Volume 1 that I'm like, I need to know what's going on in these corporations.
Yeah, definitely. And the time will come. Absolutely.
Awesome. What hobbies take up your time when you're not developing a game or making music?
In terms of hobbies, I mean, I think I really do enjoy board games and RPGs. So like the analog, which is part of how I got into the digital game design because I really loved analog games. Exploring the city, I feel like you never really get tired of. I mean, New York is such a vast space. You could pick a direction and just go. So like urban exploration, cooking, making pizza, making soups, making sandwiches. I think obviously like that's kind of weaves its way into the game. Catching movies, catching TV shows that are like deep cuts. I think past that, hobbies. Looking around the room.
You much of a reader or?
I like sci-fi. I actually I'm just getting through, and a bit of everything. I like biography, but I'm reading a book right now called Rosewater. It's a sci-fi book set in like a future, kind of, I want to say, Nigeria, and it's like it's really great. It's a really great modern sci-fi. But yeah, I don't know. It's a lot of just taking in media from everywhere. I really like just checking stuff out from all over the place. And I love listening to NTS, the radio station, for musical inspiration. And yeah.
Okay, cool.
Nothing like weirdly, like I don't I'm not an outdoorsy person. I used to bike everywhere, but and I might bike everywhere again in New York, but that's it's more just an extension of exploring the geography of the city, the architecture of the city.
Yeah, you've been a resident for a while, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
How does the perspective of the city change from being a tourist to being a resident? I've never been to New York, so.
How does it change? I don't know. It's like you feel like you're a part of something bigger. You know, you feel like when you identify with a big as a New Yorker, quote unquote, even though you sort of still have to negotiate space with strangers on a constant basis, you all feel like you're collectively like united under this idea that you're in this big metropolis that's had its ups and downs, but you're all just you're all in it together in a sense, especially when things are hard, especially when, like this year. So solidarity, sense of belonging, sense that you can reinvent yourself. It's cool. There's always a really cheap meal. You can always get a cheap like egg sandwich or like that you can get. You don't have to stretch your dollar very far to have an amazing time. But if you want to stretch your dollar far, you'll also have an amazing time. So it's like pick your adventure.
Yeah, what's the sandwich that New York's famous for? Isn't it like bacon, egg, and cheese or something?
Bacon, egg, and cheese is definitely a staple. I don't know if there's like a famous like a New York.
Well, we know pizza, but
yeah, I mean pizza. But in terms of like a sandwich, get back to you on that.
Yeah. Michigan's got the Coney dog, so
yeah. The Coney dog, cool.
Do you feel there's anything that you want like listeners to go out and check out right now? Like, I don't know, book, movie, TV show, some of the stuff we mentioned.
So yeah, I'm digging on this this record right now by this guy named Kilchofer, called The Book Room. It's spelled he goes under the name Kilchhofer. It's all analog and modular synthesizers, and it is fantastic, very inspiring. I think it's definitely going to alter some of my music making choices for the new game and the new record. Kilchofer, The Book Room, is awesome. And if I'm sure some of you have played Disco Elysium, but if you haven't, I think that's a really amazing. It's a great experience, very thoughtful and cerebral. Midnight Diner Tokyo Stories again. I was watching an anime series called Psycho-Pass, which is kind of cool. It's kind of like a Philip K. Dick style anime. The first season in particular is really striking. Another anime series was just totally weird. If you're your wheelhouse, it's called Doro Hey Doro. It's on Netflix. Doro Hey Doro. Really wacky, really interesting, very much in the vibe. And I think that'll do it for now in terms of recommendations.
Yeah. Those all sound cool. I'm looking at the Kilchofer Book Room album art right now, and that's like something I would see and be like, I gotta grab this.
Yeah, it's super cool. And like the thing about this too is like on my Discord, it's been a really nice repository for more of these recommendations, like art and music recommendations, and just various tangents, food, this, that. So if you want more, if your listeners are interested in more of like my stuff in my wheelhouse, my server is like a place where that kind of just exists, where it's like a cauldron of more of this stuff. It's sort of an extension of like what inspires me, what could inspire you, what could inspire your listeners. So
okay, yeah, I could put a link for that in the description so people can find it. Where else can people find your projects and more on you?
Mainly on my Steam page and my itch.io page. I have a website of my own, but it's more of like a mood board with links to my Steam page and my itch page and my Bandcamp page. So, I mean, I try to keep it and then my Discord server. I try to keep it relatively contained. Like, this is the work. And Twitter, COSMODDD. If people want to hear news and like moment to moment updates, but I'm a little quiet right now on social media because I'm head down. I'm working on this new thing, but yeah, definitely any of those places are places you can go to find the good stuff or the stuff. Up to you if it's good or not, but it's definitely stuff. It's definitely it's something that you might not have experienced before.
Yeah. What kind of advice do you have for anybody that's new into creating whatever, video games, art, music?
The advice that I always try to encourage for folks is there's definitely a power in finishing things. A lot of people start things and they don't finish them. But I think finishing something is a real achievement that can't be underestimated. How hard it is to do, then how sweet the victory is when you've done it. So because then it gets you in the habit of finishing more things, and then set the bar relatively low for your first thing that you want to do, your first creative endeavor, and then finish it. Right? It's like, what does finish mean? I don't know. Whatever it means to you. It's, you walk away from it, you don't want to touch it anymore, and maybe you put it out there for people to see, or maybe you just file it away. But it is absolutely finished to you. Then you build on that, because when you finish stuff, the more likely you are to finish more stuff. And finishing things is how work like this gets out in the world. At any point in time, I could have probably walked away from this and focused on other things, but I didn't. I stuck with it, and I saw these things through to the end. And really, finishing something like a game is tough, because you're patching it after the fact, and you're updating it on Steam. So it's start small and finish the thing, and that's a great foundation for whatever future. That's how you build your practice. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like what's the analogy? It's like taking the first step on the escalator, so you hit that escalator and then you just go.
Yep. You just go.
So that's great advice. Do you have anything else you want to cover before we depart?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I think we've covered most of it, more than I was anticipating, but there it is.
All right. Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you for being open to the tales, to the many, to the discourse. Right on.
All right. You have a good night.
Cheers, Cody. Take care.
Yes. All right. Bye.
Bye.
And there it is, the chat with Greg Heffernan, also known as Cosmo D, indie game design instructor, classically trained cellist, musician, all of the above, food enthusiast. Sounds like he likes food like I do, like we all do. A lot of cool things were discussed. I hope you took away some notes so that you can go check some of those things out. And I hope you check out his games, because they're like $10 each. His second game, Offbeat, is actually free, so you can just grab that one while you're at it. But yeah, I really enjoyed playing them. If I didn't enjoy them, I wouldn't have had him on here. And I really enjoyed the music and the atmosphere. So I really recommend that if you've got a PC that you can game on, you check those games out. Make sure to go follow him on Instagram and all the other places that were mentioned. You can find the stuff on Steam, the games. You can even get like bundles on there with the game and the albums, which is what I did. And you can also find them on Bandcamp, another option. And make sure to find them on HIO. In our next interview, we will be sitting with a musician out of London. Jacob Reed goes by the name of Jerker, and he has created a music that I have defined as the genre of melancholic picnic pop. And he calls emo exotica. That's a good way to describe it, I think. And when you listen to his music, you'll know why. Because it's kind of dark, not really dark and edgy. It's just a very wide abyss that it drops you in. And that's why I love it. I've made some comparisons for friends, and I think the album California by Mr. Bungle is most accurate for that. And yeah, really cool sound. So I was really excited to have him on here. And we have a good conversation about his music, of course, and then also about his family's journey through art. His mother and father are both artists. He's also a visual artist, so that's cool. And we also talk about his experience through COVID, what it's like growing up in London, and having a nice tight-knit circle of musician and creative friends, including the likes of CeCe Ward and Archie Marshall, also known as King Cruel. So, come back for that conversation in 2 weeks. And in between then, we're going to have ourselves a bonus episode. Something obviously pertaining to this episode this week. Maybe it's going to be about game design. Maybe it's going to be about the cello. Maybe it's going to be about pizza with flamingo meat on it. I don't know. You'll find out, though. So come back. Make sure to follow Nonethelesser wherever you wish, such as Instagram, and subscribe where you get podcasts, such as Spotify. This has been Cody Buchanan, your host. Thank you for listening to Nonethelesser. I'll see you next time.